At least I'm no longer worried about this panel not being entertaining enough. I'm very grateful for your forceful remarks, although I'm not entirely certain that, having moved to Washington myself just a little over 2 years ago, that I entirely share your optimism. Because I have to say, I've seen, shall we say, new political forces in America slice through an established order and slice through institutional discipline and the process for which the American national security staff are famous for, like butter on a summer day. And so I also see an American president using social media like what I think once was called the plébiscite de tous les jours, the daily plebiscite, and thereby circumventing the institutions and the processes of representative democracy. And if we do not think that that is possible over here in our own countries, I think we're badly mistaken. With that, I'm going to stop editorializing and hand over to Barry Pavel, who's had a distinguished national security career, both in the National Security Council, several White Houses, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and is currently the Vice President of the Atlantic Council. Over to you, Barry.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks in particular to the Secretary General of the committee and the committee for having me here. I don't think it's possible to say anything interesting or useful after the last two. I pride myself on substance and humor, so there's no way I can do justice. But I learned quite a bit from the last two speakers. I do want to say I'm not speaking for the Trump administration or the United States. I don't even know if Trump is a noun or a verb anymore. But I'll offer sort of 4 broad points that I've learned from my discussions with some of the new administration officials, from gleaning things from their initial documents, et cetera. And some of this might be sort of prosaic, but I thought it would be important to sort of return to ground principles, and I'll probably give you back at least 4 minutes of the 10 minutes so we can have a good give and take.
I'll believe that when I see it.
All right, here I go. My first point is that it's almost certain that the Trump administration won't be defined by isolationism. I think that's even clearer now than it was 3 weeks ago. But it will likely be a more narrowly defined approach to the pursuit of longstanding U.S. national interests. And I think this approach will be characterized by a focus on what's perceived to be best for the American people, and in particular for the American working class. I think you'll see that in national security and not just in the economic area. This doesn't mean, as we heard, an abandonment of alliances. I think, to paraphrase NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, America first doesn't mean America alone. We'll hear that this weekend almost certainly. Alliances will continue to be valued highly. We saw General Mattis go to Asia and really say a lot of things that reassured Korea and Japan of this administration's commitment to alliances. And then we had the Trump-Abe summit in Washington and Florida, the two leaders spending 2 days together, a lot of good things, good things in terms of the security order coming out of those discussions. I also wanted to say this isn't the first time I've heard things like this. I was the lead senior Pentagon career civilian in 2001, receiving the new Bush administration team and what had been under the Clinton administration a focus on engagement, just having our military go see other militaries, in particular the former Warsaw Pact. The new team came in and said, none of that anymore. We have very scarce military assets. We're going to go to security cooperation, which means what's in it for us in addition to what's in it for our allies and partners. We need mutual benefit, not just showing up and seeing other militaries. So there is a little bit of history's not repeating itself, but there's some reverberation or something closer to that. Second, I think a focus will be on the fight against terrorism, in particular the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and other violent extremist groups with global reach. One can certainly question the wisdom and efficacy of the new administration's early policies on this. If you see my Twitter feed, you'll know where I stand. And I'm one of those who question it very fundamentally. But the priority, I think, that will be given to counterterrorism and homeland security will be very clear. Third, one could surmise, and I'm saying could, a geostrategic approach to how the new administration might be dealing with nation-state rivals. The argument could be that every recent administration has sought, at the very beginning, cooperation with Russia, even at the outset of the term. I'm not sure the Trump administration has gone about it quite the way we would have expected, but they've all pursued a set of cooperative activities with Russia, even recognizing the continuing competition, as Espen said, strategic competition and potential for conflict and even crisis. None of these administrations wanted to make an enemy of Russia and China at the same time, and thereby pushing them further together into deeper cooperation. And it seems clear that the U.S.-China relationship, particularly in 2017, will be a more contested one, especially this year as President Xi heads to fall party Congress, and he needs to look strong this year before that party Congress, and with the Trump administration looking likely to push quite hard on bilateral economic issues and on China's continuing aggressive tactics in the disputed maritime waters. So I would say watch that space for, even though he moved on the one China policy, I would expect a much tougher line and much rockier time between the U.S. and China, which also is a reason I think that Trump and Abe are closer than any other foreign leader, it seems at least at this point, with the Trump administration. Lastly, I think it's really early to tell where this administration's heading. I think we need to give any administration at this point a little breathing room. I've been on the pointy end of transitions. I tell them, here's your office, the bathroom is over there. Here's where we like to have meetings, in this fancy room called the Situation Room. And so I think we need to give them a little bit of time. A lot of policy conversations haven't happened yet. What will be the result of the policy conversation between Secretary of Defense Mattis and President Trump on Russia sanctions? What would be the result of that conversation on Syria military operations? I'm really eagerly looking toward that policy. What will be the result of the conversations between Secretary of State Tillerson and Mattis and Trump on the South China Sea? I mean, I don't think these have happened yet. Policy reviews are just getting started. The world isn't waiting. We've seen the North Korean ballistic missile test already, and the response was, again, somewhat heartening. At least the rhetorical response, although the Koreans were not thrilled because they weren't mentioned in the president's statement. Anyway, I think we'll know more. We'll know a bit more after this weekend, as we heard, and there's also meetings this week between the Secretary of Defense and some of his European counterparts, so we'll know even sooner then. This weekend, remembering 8 years ago, I was on the plane with Vice President Biden helping draft the reset speech on the way to Munich before we heard what President Putin was going to say. So I think this is a very important weekend and in many ways, hopefully a milestone in U.S. policy, U.S. security and foreign policy. But I do have to agree with our moderator to be very cautious. Each new administration, each presidential candidate who wins comes in and wins by saying, I'm going to change Washington. No president in my adult life has ever won by saying, things are pretty good, I'm going to make them a little better. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, all won by saying, I'm going to go change Washington. I'm going to come from outside and change Washington. And Donald Trump, was that on steroids. And so he and his inner circle are all about disrupting. And disruption is good, chaos is good. The bureaucracy, we're leaving them in the dust, those pointy-headed, geeky experts. We're going to fix things because Washington has not aligned itself to defend and pursue American interests for the benefit of the American people. So I think there's going to be a lot more disruption before there will be assurance, or maybe it'll happen at the same time. So I would really not let your guard down if you care about this stuff. Try to influence them whenever I speak to foreign leaders and also to the U.S. government leaders. Engagement early and often is very useful and can be very helpful. I think the key question I will leave my remarks at is associating myself with Steve Hadley's comments in the press, former National Security Advisor Steve Hadley, where he said this administration is all about disruption. I think the key is what will they build once they have finished disrupting and destroying.
Thank you very much. I think it was that was a really helpful overview, and thank you also for your discipline in matters of time. I would only add perhaps a nuance from my own observation to what you've just said, which is that it seems to me, while it's true, as you say, that every American president so far has come in saying, you know, I need to shake this place up, few presidents in our living memory have offered as dystopian a vision of current affairs in America. The use of the term carnage, American carnage, is exceptional. And I think that the other thing that I would perhaps add to what you've had to say, which is that you, as a long-time policy person, I understand why you focus on policy, but it seems to me that to not understand this is our bias. People like you and all of us in this room focus on policy and its minute shifts and attempts to shape it. But I think that to fully grasp the disruptiveness of this current team is only possible if you expand your take on what they're doing to their worldviews and their attitudes. And to some degree, I think that those may be more important in shaping what is about to happen in Washington than their take on policy, which I suspect will be supplied by others. Yes, please.
I'm indisciplined.
Please, no, but you bought yourself time, so go ahead.
Look at the numbers. Look at the electoral. Look back at the numbers of the election.
Yeah.
This is just an interesting footnote, not an endnote. Look back at the numbers. This was the lowest turnout election in a very long time. Hillary Clinton got a lot less votes than Barack Obama 2008 and Barack Obama 2012. Donald Trump got a lot less votes than John McCain 2008 and then Mitt Romney 2012. This is not a movement. That's just a footnote because whoever wins gets to implement their agenda like it's a mandate regardless of how close the election was. But I guess my only point is when people say this is a new national movement in the United States that has enormous support from the heartland, no one showed up for this election. They were not inspired by either candidate.
And we're not going to mention the inaugural, are we? Although you and I both know people who would now refer to alternative facts. But the reality, but I will throw one thing back at you, and then I'm going to hand to Osley, which is that this administration does seem to have a capability to make things appear otherwise than they are, and to magnify numbers in such a way that their impact on what people believe to be true and what shapes people's understanding of what's going on is out of all proportion to the actual things that happened. And I think that is, should ring a note of caution to all of us.